Welcome to the Foods for Hormones webinar. So this is my first ever webinar, so if anything goes wrong, I apologize in advance. If I have any tech issues as well, I'm sorry, but this is all quite new to me. But I've been kind of planning this for quite a while, and I'm really excited to be cracking on with it and doing it today. Thank you all for registering and coming along. I'm just going to see if anybody else comes in too. We've got quite a few people still joining. But yeah, I also there's different points throughout the webinar that I've put to have questions, but I'm also going to stay on at the end to do like a Q&A if anybody has any questions that they want answering, and you'll be able to type or speak if you want to. It's completely up to you. But yeah, I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes to see if anybody else logs on, and then we will get going. Yeah, if anything seems weird at any point, just put it in the Q&A, because it's probably me just messing up with some form of technology. Even the simplest of technology I somehow managed to mess up, so just let me know if there's any problems. But I will get started soon. Okay, so today's webinar topic is essentially all about foods for hormones. So I'm going to be talking about what hormones are actually for, and why I don't stop banging on about them, and why that's relevant to us, and then what we can do to be supporting that. So first of all, I'm just going to start with a little bit about me, very small amount about me. So I'm Isabel, but most people call me Iz. Feel free to do so as well. I'm a registered nutritionist and a registered nutritional therapist. And my kind of statement is that I give women the tools that they need to be their happiest and healthiest self. I'm specialised in female health and disordered eating. They don't both have to be together. Those are just my two areas of specialty. And I'll talk a little bit more about the end, about what that means and how I might be able to help you if you feel that you need it. But yeah, that's just who I am. So when I work within female health, I'm all about making your hormones work for you rather than against you, because we have this idea within hormones that being a woman just kind of sucks, and that we all have to deal with these terrible symptoms from our hormones and our cycle every single month. And I just don't agree with that at all. I think our hormones can absolutely be beneficial. We can use them to our advantage completely. And we kind of have to, because there's usually a couple of days or a week of every month where we just don't really feel ourselves, where we're suffering with PMS, everything's up and down and all over the place. And we kind of just put up and shut up, because that's what we've been told to do a lot of the time as women. Just get on with it, essentially, is what we do. And that's not okay, because a week of every month is 3 months of every year, which is a quarter of our lives. And if we are spending a quarter of our lives being anything other than our best selves, that's not okay with me. So I am here to make sure that we are our best selves every day of every year, and just essentially be the queens that we were born to be. So more about our hormones then. So just a brief introduction to what our hormones are. So why are they important, how are they made, what do they do? The word hormone comes from the Greek derivative hormon. We're really creative with renaming our Greek derivatives. And hormone means set in motion. And this is what our hormones do. They set things in motion. They trigger other things to happen. They are the chemical messengers that we produce, the communicators of the body. So essentially everything knows what's going on because of our hormones. So they coordinate and regulate our processes like growth, metabolism, appetite, sleep. All of those things that happen in our body are regulated by our hormones. And we have two classifications of hormones in the body. So we have steroid hormones and peptide hormones. I promise I've done my best to make this slide and the next slide feel as little like a biology lesson as possible. And I hope you will stay with me through this. So we have steroid hormones and peptide hormones. And steroid hormone means that it is created from fats, in particular cholesterol. So all of our steroid hormones, which is all of our sex hormones, are derived from cholesterol. So if we don't have enough fats in our body, then we aren't going to be creating enough hormones. So we have to be getting these fats in our diet in order to be creating the steroid hormones that we need. And the other type of hormones that we have are peptide hormones. These derive from amino acids, so from protein. And examples of these would be things like thyroid and insulin. So all of our hormones are really, really important, and they essentially tell each part of our body what to do, when to do it, and how long to do it for. So what does that actually look like in terms of our internal systems? So you may have heard of the endocrine system before. You might be having like year 8 biology flashbacks right about now. And our endocrine system, bear with me, is made up of different organs, essentially. So these glands are part of our endocrine system. Hypothalamus, pituitary gland, thyroid, pancreas, adrenal glands, and ovaries, and it would be the testes in men. And all of these glands release our chemical messengers, which is our hormones, into the bloodstream. So that's what they're responsible for. A better way to think about this, I think, is to think of it as like a company or a business. So I'm going to hopefully make this seem a little bit more simple now. So if you think of the endocrine system as the communication network. So if you think about wherever you work, like your business or whatever, the communication network is like Gmail or WhatsApp. And that's how you're all communicating. The hypothalamus is the CEO, the pituitary gland is the manager, and then you have all of your other departments. So your HR team, your sales team, your marketing team, your production team. And all of the messages have to get passed between all of these different people in order for things to happen smoothly. And to give you an example of what could be going wrong, it would be like if you work hypothetically in the sales team and you received a message through your communication network telling you that you needed to be in Liverpool on a Wednesday afternoon. So you turn up in Liverpool on a Wednesday afternoon, but you actually needed to be in Leeds on a Wednesday morning. Then you're going to be pretty pissed off, but it's also going to be causing problems for the rest of the system. It's not just you that gets impacted, it's everything else that's going on. And similarly, if there was messages coming from your manager telling somebody in the sales team to go to a certain place to do a presentation, and that message kept coming and people kept being sent there when that message was only supposed to be sent once, that can have problems too. So all of these things, they all impact each other. And even if one thing goes wrong, everything else gets impacted. So hormones don't work in isolation. They work in synergy and ideally in balance. So we want everything to be turning up in the right place at the right time for the right reason. So how many hormones are there? So I would really like everyone to have a guess at this. If you could put in the Q&A box, because I don't think there's a messaging box in here, what your guess is at how many hormones there are. So have a little think, whatever number you think feels good to you, and have a guess at how many hormones there are, and just put it in the Q&A box, which I believe will be at the bottom of your screen. Okay, oh, we've got some numbers coming. This is exciting. This is good because now I know everything's working and I'm not just talking to myself. Okay, so we've got 15, 50, 150, 50, 12, 100, 40, 12 is coming up quite a lot, and 50, okay. Quite a few guesses. Anyone else want to put in their guess? 60, 20. Okay, lots of guesses. So we're anywhere from 15 to 150 is where we're looking at the moment. And you are correct. We are definitely between 15 and 150. The answer is, well, the answer is how many that we know of, because we're always discovering things about the body, and it's actually 77. So there are 77 hormones in the body that we know of. There could be more. Essentially too many. So all of these are all essential. They all have different roles. They're all important. And that is a lot of hormones for one body to be balancing. You know, that just sounds like an entire job on its own, just keeping 77 hormones in balance. And this is what our body does every single day whilst we're off doing other things. So the body is actually pretty incredible. So what do all of these hormones do? I'm not going to go through all 77 because we'd be here for several hours if I did that. But I just wanted to go through how different all of these hormones can be, so that it's not just all to do with the menstrual cycle. So most of us will have heard of hormones being in relation to our menstrual hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone is usually referred to the group of androgens. So testosterone and DHEA, we usually call those androgens, but then we also have luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, all of these. This isn't the whole list of all the hormones involved in the menstrual cycle, but this is a couple of them. Hormones are also involved in stress. So you may have heard of cortisol, often being referred to as the stress hormone. And then we have adrenaline, noradrenaline. All of these things are all involved in our stress response, which is still really important as well. Most people have also heard of our happiness hormones. So serotonin and dopamine are often referred to as our happiness hormones. And then oxytocin is our love hormone, or the cuddle hormone. And oxytocin is produced when we hug people. So when we have physical contact, we produce oxytocin. And one of the glands that produces the most oxytocin is the mammary glands, because when women breastfeed, we produce very, very high levels of oxytocin, so that we just fall in love with our babies when we breastfeed, which I think is really adorable. And then endorphins, which most of us have heard of, that we usually get a big endorphin rush after exercise, but endorphins are there all the time. Hormones are also involved in our sleep. So our main sleep hormone is called melatonin. Melatonin actually works on an opposite schedule to cortisol. So these are the two hormones that drive our circadian rhythm. But that is like a whole other webinar. And also hormones are involved with our hunger and our digestion. So two pretty important ones here are leptin and ghrelin, which you may or may not have heard of. Leptin is our satiety hormone. So leptin is our fullness hormone. And then ghrelin is our hunger hormone. So ghrelin is the hormone that makes us feel hungry. That is actually a hormone. That's a process that we can't override. We can't ignore when ghrelin is telling us that we're hungry. And the more that we ignore that, the more ghrelin we actually produce. So we keep feeling hungrier. It's biological, it's to keep us alive. And then when we eat, our hormone leptin is produced, which lets the brain know that we're full. So that's how we kind of know when to start and stop eating. It's because of leptin and ghrelin. But then all of these other hormones are involved in the digestive process as well. There are a whole bunch of other systems that use hormones, but I'm not going to go through. I just thought those are some of the most interesting and probably some of the ones that you'd heard of before. But yeah, this is just to highlight how much we use hormones every single day and how important they are. But what we're going to focus a little bit more on today is three hormones, the key players of our menstrual cycle. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, you may have heard of before. Estrogen is typically thought of as the kind of female hormone because it is in higher quantities in females. So it's produced by the ovaries, the adrenal glands, and adipose tissue. And its main role is growth promotion. And its main cycle phase is follicular phase, which will make more sense in the next slide. Progesterone is in the other half of the cycle, so the luteal phase, and it's produced by the ovaries, the adrenal glands, and its main role is the maintaining the womb lining and pregnancy. So progesterone is often referred to as the pregnancy hormone, and that's because at the end of a cycle, if we aren't to become pregnant, then our hormones drop off. But if we are pregnant, then progesterone will keep building throughout our entire pregnancy to make sure that we have a nice, happy little home for our fetus in our womb. So progesterone is often thought of as the pregnancy hormone. And then also we have testosterone, which is often thought of as the male hormone, but we have testosterone as well. Just like men have estrogen, women have testosterone. It's also produced by the ovaries and the adrenal glands. Its main role is growth, maintenance, and repair, and its main cycle phase is right in the middle during ovulation. So to show you what that looks like as a visual, this is what a typical monthly cycle looks like. So the pink line here is estrogen, then we've got progesterone is the green line, and testosterone is the blue line. So the first 2 weeks of the cycle, because a typical cycle lasts 4 weeks or 28 days, and day 1 is the first day of the bleed. So the first day of your period is day 1. It's not the first day after you stop bleeding. The bleed is the start of the cycle, not the end. So day 1 will be the first day your period arrives, and then the last day would be the day before your next period arrives. And the first 2 weeks is called the follicular phase. Estrogen's building throughout this phase. That's when a follicle is being stimulated and an egg will be released. And then we have ovulation. And in the luteal phase, second 2 weeks of the cycle, that's when progesterone is more dominant. We also have 2 other big hormones involved in this called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. I'm not going to go into those into too much detail because, I mean, it's just too many hormones at this point. But these 3 are very influential on how we feel in different parts of the cycle. So in different times throughout these 4 weeks, we're likely to feel more energized, we're likely to have higher or lower sex drive, we're likely to have a higher or lower appetite, more likely to be tired at certain times. And I do go into this in a lot more detail in a hormone program that I've created, which I will tell you more about at the end. But I'm not going to spend too much time on this at the moment, just because I'm aware that, you know, you've all got things to do and it's a Thursday evening. But this part at the end, I don't know if you can see my mouse, I hope you can, but at the end of the cycle, when all of the hormones are dropping, that's when we experience PMS, because that's when all of our hormones are falling and our body doesn't really like it. So that's where the most likely time we are likely to experience PMS. We are very likely to be having symptoms throughout the whole of our cycle, but it will usually be at the end that we start to experience PMS. So what is hormone imbalance then? So hormone imbalance, I think, is talked about quite a lot, or the phrase is thrown around. So our hormones, as I've already explained, are the chemicals produced by the glands of the endocrine system. And then hormone balance is having adequate levels and availability of all hormones. So it's having adequate production and availability, because we can have those hormones there, but we might not actually be using them properly. So producing a hormone and utilizing a hormone are 2 different things, just to make matters even more confusing. But hormone balance is basically that everything is going to plan. And then hormone imbalance is that we have too much or too little of any hormone. So it could be that we have too much of lots of hormones, or too little of lots of hormones, or too much or of one, or too little of one, or too much of some and not enough of others. So there's a whole bunch of different scenarios that can be going on here, but even just one hormone being too high or too low then impacts all of our other hormones. So you kind of have a sweet spot of where we want to be. And ways that we can know whether we're experiencing hormone imbalance is there's lots of symptoms. So fatigue, weight gain, mood changes, acne, dry or oily skin, heavy periods, painful periods, irregular periods, breast tenderness, constipation, bloating, hot flushes, poor sleep, headaches, and low sex drive are all signs of hormonal imbalance. There are more, but they wouldn't fit on my page. So these are all signs of hormonal imbalance, and I have a little poll that should come up on your screen now, hopefully, if that's worked. And if you could all vote onto which answer fits with you. So we've got none of them, one or two, between 2 and 5, 5 or more, or if you think most of them relate to you, then just click whichever answer you think relates to you the most. Okay, nearly everyone's voted. I think we're still, oh, okay, great. Everyone has voted. So I'm going to share the results with you all now. So hopefully you should all be able to see the results of that poll. There's a few people who are only experiencing 2 to 5, but most of you there are experiencing at least 5, if not more, of those symptoms at the moment, which doesn't sound very enjoyable if you ask me. I'm really sorry that you all are going through that, but at least we're not alone, hey? But realistically, what this poll should show is that the answer for none should be 100%, because all of these symptoms are common, but none of them are normal. So common and normal are very different things, and things can become so common that we think they're normal. You know, oh, well, I get PMS and she gets PMS and she gets PMS, so PMS must be a normal thing. It's not. It's a sign that something is going wrong. In an ideal cycle, we should experience no adverse symptoms. And you might be thinking, oh yeah, but what's the likelihood of that? It's possible. That's how the body is supposed to run. And there's so many things that we can be doing or not doing to ensure that that happens, and make sure that we are not having these horrible symptoms that ruin our lives and make us, you know, just want to stay at home and eat chocolate. We should be able to not be interrupted in what we're doing. And for all intents and purposes, our period should kind of just arrive with no annoyingness to go with it, and then we can just carry on with our days. But that poll has just shown us that most of us are experiencing a lot of other things alongside our period that we don't really want to be dealing with. So what influences this? So our internal environment influences our hormone imbalance. So what I mean by internal environment is our nutrient status. So this would be our vitamins, our minerals, and the quality of food that we are consuming. Our metabolism and our digestion. So metabolism and digestion are often kind of talked about in the same way, but they're actually very different things. So if someone eats a meal and then goes to the toilet really soon after, someone might be like, oh, your metabolism's really high. But that's digestion. So metabolism is the rate that we do all of our bodily functions. So hormone production comes into that, but also cell proliferation and cell recreation. So our cells are constantly reproducing. Every single cell in our body, they're always dying and they're being reproduced. Things like keeping our heart beating, our detoxification system in our body, like our liver and our kidneys, and all of those things, it all requires a lot of energy. The main bulk of energy used in our day will be all of those things that just happen to keep us alive, and they would happen whether we're laying in bed not doing anything or whether we're walking around all day. And how our metabolism is functioning can impact our hormone balance as well. Our physiology and genetics, our toxic load, which by that I mean the toxins that we're taking in from our environment, stimulants, so that would be things like caffeine, alcohol, less legal stimulants, and then inadequate energy intake as well. So if our energy is too low, we can't actually be doing any of these processes that we need to. And then we also have our external environment. So this would be things like stress, exercise, relationships, our toxic exposure, which would then impact our toxic load, which is in our internal. And then our living and working environment as well. So there's a lot of things that influence our hormone balance. And I am just going to focus on essentially our nutrient status today, because that is what is influenced by our diet. Sorry, just checking to see if anyone's put any questions. Hopefully I'm not confusing anyone. So parts of our diet that influence our hormone balance. So our energy intake, our nutrient status and any deficiencies, antioxidants, inflammation, our omega-3 to 6 ratio, and our fiber intake. So I'm going to start by talking about our energy intake. So this is by taking in too many or too little calories. So low calorie diets typically don't work very well for women, especially low fat ones. So low fat diets really don't work well for women because we don't then have the raw materials we need to build our hormones. And low calorie diets, very low calorie diets, can be really catastrophic for women in terms of our hormone balance. And ironically, one of the main times that women are told to lose weight is when they go and see a doctor because they are experiencing hormonal issues. And the advice is often lose some weight. But weight loss strategies can actually aggravate hormone imbalance even more. And the reason for this is because our body's really good at identifying when we're not in homeostasis. So our body always wants to keep us in a nice level of what it knows is going on, and it senses when something happens. So if we start reducing the amount of energy we're taking in or massively increasing the amount of energy that we're using up, our body tries to alter that because it doesn't want us to be lacking in energy. It wants us to have energy available all the time. And because our body doesn't understand what's going on, our body doesn't know that supermarkets exist and we can go and get food whenever we want to, our body interprets a restriction of calories as famine, because the body is always kind of prepared for feast and famine. So it thinks that our environment is a famine environment, and what we need to prioritize is survival. So the body will prioritize the systems that are essential for survival so it can conserve energy. And one of the systems that is not necessary for survival is the reproductive system. It is necessary for the survival of the human race, but not for the individual body. So if your body is thinking, right, we just need to look after number one, it can then shut down the reproductive system, which is why women can then lose their menstrual cycle when they start consuming too little calories or their body weight becomes too low. It's a warning from the body. It's basically saying we can't handle this. We don't have enough energy to do everything, so we've got to take it from somewhere else. Additionally, if the body thinks that we're in a famine, it doesn't really want to be reproducing anyway, because we wouldn't be able to look after a child. So there's lots of different things that can happen, and to an extreme point, it can mean that we lose our cycle. But initially, it can just mean that our hormones become out of balance. On the flip side, having too much energy can then lead to weight gain. And adipose tissue or fat tissue is one of the places that produces estrogen. So if we have excessive amounts of body fat on our body, we can be producing too much estrogen for what we actually need. And one thing that I think is a good way of kind of thinking about this and remembering it is, there's no men in this webinar, so I can say this, but when men put on weight and they get like man boobs, that's not just fat storage, that's breast tissue that starts to grow because they are producing more estrogen because they have more fat stores. And I think that's fascinating. So too much or too little in our energy intake can impact our hormone balance. Second one would be nutrient status and deficiency. So this includes all of our nutrients, our macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, and protein, plus our micronutrients, so vitamins and minerals. And I'm going to be talking about those in a bit more detail in a few slides. Our antioxidants. So antioxidants protect us from free radical damage and oxidative stress. So to kind of explain what that means, free radicals are unstable atoms that can cause damage in our body, and we get these from things like toxins, pollutants, stress, things that can happen in our environment, but also from certain foods as well. And that puts a lot of stress on the body and can be really damaging. But the reason that they're unstable is because they're missing an electron in their outer shell, if anyone can remember like GCSE chemistry. And antioxidants give those atoms an electron in their external shell, so they become more stable. But on the flip side, we don't want to be having too many antioxidants. So there's always like a sweet spot with what we have in our diet. We don't want too little and we don't want too much. But antioxidants can be really protective against stabilizing our free radicals. Inflammation. So inflammation is one of those words that gets thrown around all the time. We get inflammation from inflammatory foods, infection, injury, autoimmunity, toxic exposure, long-term exposure to irritants. All of these things can be causing inflammation in the body. And then our omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So this is the ratio of fats necessary for hormone production. Omega-3, we're going to talk a lot more about today, comes from oily fish. Omega-6 comes from things like nuts and seeds. And when we eat them as nuts and seeds, it's a really nice amount that we get, and they're not very processed. But when we have them in the oil form, so things like vegetable oil, sunflower oil, then those fats have become damaged, and we also consume them in much higher quantities. The ideal ratio of omega-3 to 6 in the body that we want is 1:1. So we want to be having equal amounts of omega-3 and omega-6 in our diet. And in the standard Western diet, so what most people will be consuming in the UK, this ratio is more like 1:17. So on average, we're consuming 17 times more omega-6 than we are omega-3. And this is because omega-6 is just present in a lot more foods. So a lot of processed foods that we'll be eating will use things like vegetable oils because they're cheaper, they're easy to access. But we want to be mindful of that ratio because when it's too high, it can then aggravate our inflammation. And then finally, our fiber intake. So the elimination of hormones is just as important as the production of hormones. And we want to be having successful elimination and excretion of those hormones and our metabolites. And that happens through our detoxification system, so going through our liver, and then excreted through our poo. So when we go to the toilet, we're getting rid of the excess hormones and the metabolites, so the byproducts of our hormones. And if this is impacted, so if we aren't regular with our bathroom habits, if we aren't going to the toilet often, then our like packaged up estrogen ready to be getting rid of can then come out to play again, which can then mean we've got way too much estrogen going around our body when we were doing such a good job of trying to produce it in the first place, and then suddenly we've got too much. So that can then contribute to estrogen dominance, which can be one of the most aggravating factors for women. So we want to be thinking about how we're eliminating hormones as well as how we're producing them. And which nutrients do we mainly need for this? So the answer really is all of them. We need all nutrients in our diet, all of our macronutrients and our micronutrients. But the key kind of 6 things that we want to be looking out for is omega-3, zinc, magnesium, vitamin B6, selenium, and vitamin D. And that sounds like a list of supplements that you could buy at Boots. However, we absorb nutrients far better from food than we do from supplements, and they are in very safe and very good levels in foods, whereas supplementation can add to our toxic load because then we can become too high in the things that we need, which we would then have to get rid of. So that puts more pressure on the liver. It leads to toxicity, and the liver has to work on overdrive to get rid of them. And also, it just wastes your money because if you're buying these supplements and then you're just peeing them out, what's the point? And why would we not eat food when we can? So I'm going to then go into talk about how we can incorporate these in our diet. But first of all, do we have any questions? And I can see that I think there have been some questions in the question box. Have to go. Oh, bye, Rosie. Sorry. When you said there are no men in the webinar and then discussed men putting on weight and man moves, Joe ran in to look out the window for his takeaway. Not a question, just an anecdote. Great. Does anyone have any questions at this point that they'd like answering? Have I said anything that anyone is confused about? Or have I lost anyone? No one's putting anything, so that's either a really good or bad thing. Either everyone's still with me or everyone's just sat there like, what is she talking about? No, all good. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go into, have you got any suggestions for veggie foods containing omega-3? So I'm going to go into this now. So I'm going to talk about the food. If anyone does have any more questions, then you feel free to keep putting them in and I'll answer them when I get a minute. So let's talk about food then. So the first one I'm going to talk about is oily fish. And this is because it contains omega-3 essential fatty acids, vitamin B12, vitamin D, iodine, and protein. There's some examples of oily fish over here on the right. The reason that these nutrients are important is because they create basically the foundation for our hormone production, reduce inflammation, and they support our omega-3 to 6 ratio. So omega-3s make up all of our cell membranes. So all of our cells have a protective membrane around them, and that comes from omega-3. And they're also involved in nerve development. So we need our omega-3s for, so many things outside of hormone production, but our nerves are really essential as well. And then we have different types of omega-3. So we have EPA and DHA. And these are important for the production of prostaglandins, and these are similar to hormones. They're a hormone-like substance that are released around about week 4 of the cycle, and these help regulate our blood pressure, inflammation, hormone production, all of these things, but they also trigger menstrual cramps and menstrual pain. And when these are out of balance or not being produced properly, that can then aggravate the pain and cramps that we experience when we're on our period. So oily fish is a really, really important thing to be including in our diets, which most of us probably don't consume that much of. The second food I'm going to talk about is dark leafy green veg. Dark green leafy veg. That's the order I meant to say that in. So there's some examples of what those would be over here on the left. And the reason for these is fiber, indole 3-carbinol, vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin K. So fiber is really important for elimination. I was just talking about this. So our estrogen detoxification and elimination relies on fiber, and we get that from veg. Indole 3-carbinol then. Indole 3-carbinol lowers the risk of estrogen-enhanced cancers. So it neutralizes carcinogens. And this is because it helps to remove the toxins that mimic estrogen. And these can come from places like BPAs in plastics. And these are basically really, really harmful for the body. And indole 3-carbinol helps eliminate those. And then vitamin A, C, and K they all have antioxidant properties. So those are helpful for reducing inflammation, and then supporting our reducing oxidative stress, and supporting overall balance as well. So dark green leafy veg is definitely something that we want to be including more of. These lists of foods that I've included, by the way, aren't extensive. There's more that could be on there. So there are definitely other vegetables that would be considered dark green and leafy. The next one I'm going to talk about, which is probably the food I talk to everyone about, which is seeds, particularly linseeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, and chia seeds. So these contain magnesium, zinc, selenium, phytoestrogens, vitamin E, vitamin C, and B vitamins. So magnesium is really important for hormone development and energy production. So in all processes that happen in the body, we have like cofactors. So all of the minerals in our body, the reason they're so important is because they're cofactors for the chemical reactions that happen to allow new things to be produced. And magnesium is one of the most important cofactors in hormone development and energy production. And it's also one of the things that's found to be low in quite a lot of people's diets. Magnesium also helps with digestion and constipation as well. So it can be really useful for supporting a regular cycle or relieving effects like constipation. Zinc supports our thyroid heavily. So zinc supports the thyroid conversion of T4 to T3. So T3 is the active form of our thyroid hormone, and it has to be converted from T4 in order to be able to work. And zinc is one of the cofactors in that process. And zinc's also involved in the metabolism of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So it's a very important mineral. Selenium activates the thyroid gland. So the thyroid gland is in our neck. It's like a little butterfly shaped gland. And selenium also protects against oxidative damage. So that would be from our free radicals. Phytoestrogens then, so these can help with estrogen dominance and estrogen deficiency. So phytoestrogens from plants have been found to be beneficial for both estrogen dominance and estrogen deficiency, because they can mimic how estrogen behaves. So what this means is they can latch on to a receptor site, and they're very, very similar to the estrogen that we make, and that will then have the same estrogenic effect as our own estrogen, but they're also helpful in eliminating excess estrogen that we might be producing anyway. So they're really helpful. Vitamin E and vitamin C are both antioxidants, and then all the B vitamins are involved in energy production, so they're all cofactors in that cycle. If anyone can remember the Krebs cycle from school, B vitamins are really involved in that. But B vitamins are also really important for our hair, skin, and nail health, which I think is a really good thing to think about, because we can actually see the impacts of those. So getting in our B vitamins can be really helpful when we need a bit of visual support for our hormones. Nuts. So particularly almonds, walnuts, cashews, Brazil nuts, peanuts, and pine nuts. And this is for several reasons. So these are all found to be high in fiber, and the omega-3 and 6 ratio is really beneficial in nut form. So we get a nice level of omega-3s and omega-6s. They're also high in selenium, vitamin B6, magnesium, and vitamin E, which we just talked about, but also iron. So iron loss is one of the things that we need to be mindful of as a female, because we do lose iron every month, and it can be quite difficult to stay on top of that through diet. So we do want to be getting in as many iron sources as we can. Signs of iron loss are tiredness, coldness, paleness, and that can indicate iron deficiency anemia. And the irony is, iron deficiency anemia can then contribute to hormone imbalance. So we can be losing iron due to our menstrual cycle, and then if that results in iron deficiency overall, that can then impact our overall hormone balance. So there's so many things going on here that we have to think about. Walnuts and chia seeds, to answer your question, Laura, are both vegetarian sources of omega-3. In my hormone program, I do talk about this in a lot of detail. I don't really have time to go through all the ins and outs right now, but I talk about what the difference is between the sources from oily fish and the sources from plants, and why that's important, and how they differ and what we can be doing about it. In general, if we aren't getting any animal sources of omega-3, we would want to consider supplementation. If you're worried about that and you want to talk to me about it, then please feel free to send me a message. But like I said, on my program, there's a lot of detail into why that happens. And Laura, I think you've been on the program, so you should be able to go back and check that in Feed Your Hormones and the omega-3 section, and it will go through that in there. Okay, so final food that I'm going to talk about is whole grains. So whole grains are high in fiber, vitamin B6, magnesium, zinc, iron, and copper. And this supports our hormone production, estrogen balance, all the things that I've been talking about so far. But something that I want to talk a little bit about here is insulin. So whole grains are helpful for regulating our insulin production. And insulin is produced in response to glucose in the bloodstream. It kind of allows us to utilize glucose. It's like the doorman. So if you imagine that each of our cells has a door, and we've got glucose in our bloodstream wanting to get into our cell to use it as energy, insulin's the doorman that opens the door and allows the glucose into the cell. So we need insulin there to be able to utilize the glucose as energy. But when we have too much insulin, that can aggravate our hormone balance, because insulin itself is a hormone. It's one of our amino acid derived hormones, so our peptide hormones. And insulin prevents our blood glucose from becoming too high or too low. So if our glucose that's available in our blood becomes too low, then we can suffer hypoglycemia. If it becomes too high, then we can suffer hyperglycemia. And both of these can be fatal. So insulin is really, really important because we want to be making sure that we have nice, steady blood glucose levels. Insulin dysregulation is caused by highs and lows of glucose intake. So when we have a bunch of glucose all at once and then it falls, and then we take in a bunch of glucose all at once and then it falls again, this can cause insulin dysregulation, which can then disrupt our adrenal glands, which upregulates cortisol, which is our stress hormone, which will then interfere with our sex hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone can all be impacted because of blood glucose dysregulation. So if we're taking in quite high amounts of glucose, whether that's in the form of sugar itself or carbohydrates, and then we're not having any for a really long period of time, and we sort of get this roller coaster effect, that can have a knock-on effect on our hormones overall. Fiber helps to support the steady release of glucose into our bloodstream. So foods that are high in fiber, they're often called like slow release energy, like oats are always referred to as like slow release energy, and it's because it's true. It does allow for a much steadier release of glucose into our bloodstream, which helps to keep our insulin levels in check, which means that our hormones have a better chance of staying nice and balanced, and we're less likely to experience things like cravings. Our energy will be steadier and our mood should be more balanced overall as well. Okay, so that is the 5 main foods. I say foods, they're definitely food groups. There's lots of foods within them. But hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea as to why we want to be including those foods rather than just giving you a list of foods to eat. But I have another poll for you now in case I've sent you to sleep. And I'm just wondering, which of these foods would you say that you consume the most of? So there should be a poll up on your screen now. We've got oily fish, dark green leafy veg, nuts, seeds, whole grains. Which would you say you consume the most of out of those foods in your diet? Okay, so everyone has voted, and I'm going to share the results with you now. So most of us are doing well with the whole grains and the dark green leafy veg. Good, nice guys. So I'm glad that we're getting those in. But now I have another question for you. Which of these would you say you consume the least of? So I'm going to put up another poll, and then you'll be able to vote in that one. Can I have my next poll, please, Zoom? So which of these foods would you say you consume the least of? Oily fish, dark green leafy veg, seeds, nuts, or whole grains? Oh, that. If you could see the things changing, I don't know if you can, but it's quite entertaining. Okay, nearly everyone's voted. Okay, so everyone has voted. We can see there that oily fish and seeds are definitely the least consumed. And what was quite funny from being able to watch that poll is that I think it was like seeds, oily fish, seeds, oily fish, seeds, oily fish, and it was like a little race. But yeah, this doesn't surprise me at all. Oily fish, especially, tends to be something that most of us don't really consume in our diets because a lot of the time it's just pretty gross. You know, we don't want to eat raw mops and herring. But the good news is there are lots of ways we can be consuming these foods in our diet, and I have very handily put together a recipe collection for all of you, which you will receive. I think the email will be sent tomorrow. And these are the recipes that are going to be included in it. So there's 7 recipes in total. And what I've tried to do with these recipes is, rather than incorporate the foods into meals, because the thing with these foods that I'm talking about, it's not just a case of having them every once in a while. We want to be consuming them on a regular basis as frequently as possible. So I've tried to create recipes that you could very easily include as part of your daily or weekly routine. So things like granola, smoothies, bars, pesto crackers. They're all very delicious recipes, even the oily fish ones. So the teriyaki mackerel, I know that is a meal, but it's just because I think it's one of the nicest ways you can eat mackerel. I have hated mackerel my entire life, and I really like this recipe. So trust me, it's really nice. And then there's also oily fish included in the brunch as well. So you should be able to hopefully find some enjoyable ways of having oily fish. The seed crackers are literally pretty much just made out of seeds, and they're really tasty. They have like a toasted nutty flavor. Obviously the nut and seed oat bars, the granola. Hopefully these are going to be some really tasty recipes for you guys to be including as part of your regular routine, and you'll be receiving those tomorrow. But the thing that I want to really kind of hit home with is that don't stop there. You know, I talked about all of the things that can be impacting our hormonal imbalance overall, and diet's a really good place to start, but there is so much we can be doing to support ourselves, and you don't have to be experiencing these horrible symptoms every week. You really do, every month. You really don't. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And this is a really important thing to remember when it comes to hormones, because it's all happening within our bodies, and it's really easy to ignore it when we can't see it. But it's still there, it's still going on. And the way that I can support people through this, or the way that I do support people through this, just to give you an idea of kind of what I do, is I have there's three main ways I work with people: nutritional therapy, nutrition counseling, and then my hormone program. So nutritional therapy is a one-to-one, unique, holistic experience. So nutritional therapy identifies the root cause of symptoms to support imbalance and restore optimal health. So essentially what this kind of means is that lots of symptoms can have one root cause, but one root cause can also display in lots of different ways. So usually if there's lots of little things going on, they all come down to one thing, and nutritional therapy is about identifying what that thing is and then supporting it. The way that I kind of describe it is like, if you had a plant that had spots on the leaves, would you put cream on the leaves, or would you treat the root? You treat the root of the problem, and we need to be addressing ourselves in the same way. We need to figure out what it is that's going on, because all of these things display in different ways in different people, and it's about figuring out you and who you are and how we can best support you, because it's going to be completely different to how we support somebody else. I also work through nutrition counseling, so this is a little bit more focused on relationships with food, disordered eating patterns, eating disorders, and just basically giving diet culture the finger and being able to create a healthy lifestyle and a healthy relationship with food without having to buy into all of the stupid elimination detoxifying diets that you see. And then finally my hormone program, which is what I'm going to kind of go through how that works, because hopefully if you came on this webinar, it's because you are interested in knowing how much more you can support yourself. So the hormone program that I've developed is called Own Your Hormones, and it spans across 4 weeks. So it's 28 days. Week 1's called Meet Your Hormones, and that's in week 1 we go through what the menstrual cycle is, how it works in a lot more detail than what I did in this webinar, and how those hormones influence us. So why we get moody, why we get hungry, why we get tired, what normal actually is, and how we can get there. Week 2 is about food. So you might think that we've talked a lot about food today, but trust me, there's a lot more to come. So I go into a lot more detail into which nutrients we need and why, and more nutrients on top of what we've talked about today. And then there's a 22-page recipe guide as well, and an in-stock essentials guide, which is basically a guide as to what foods are really helpful to have in all the time, and then how you can actually use those in your daily life. Week 3 is called Balance Your Hormones. So that's all about bloating, craving, weight loss, and then your guide to contraception as well. So that guide has had a lot of love and time go into it, and it goes through the difference between a cycle when you're off the pill or hormonal contraceptive and a cycle when you are on a hormonal contraceptive, because those can be really, really different things. And all of the different options that are available to you. So hormonal contraceptives impact us on a physical, physiological, and mental perspective. And I go through how all of those things could be influencing you. And then all of the options that there are, because it's not just a case of like the pill or condoms, there's so many things that are out there. And it just helps you decide what is best for you. And then week 4 is called Control Your Hormones, and we talk about sleep, stress, exercise, caffeine, alcohol, and sugar. So lots of things are talked about in all of these, but it's all delivered each week. So you have like quite a steady stream of information rather than an overload. And it looks like this. So this is just an example of what kind of the guides look like. There's 11 guides in total across the 4 weeks, and something like 95 pages of content in total, plus all of the videos. So all the content is delivered through downloadable PDFs and videos. This is like a screenshot of my website, so to give you an idea of what it looks like. And all of this is available as part of the program, and you can also join our like Facebook community. So anyone who works with me or comes on the program joins this group, and in that group I do a weekly live Q&A. I post articles in there, we do polls, and it's basically a safe space for you to talk about things that you may have previously been told are like a taboo topic, or you feel like you can't talk to anyone about, because sometimes it can feel like an awkward topic to bring up. But it's never awkward when I'm around, because I talk about the menstrual cycle all the time. And this is just a space for you to be able to talk to other people in the community on the program that I've worked with, be able to talk to me, be able to just talk about anything that's going on. And you also get access to my members area, which I'm going to go through in a second. So everyone who's come on this webinar today, you'll be getting the email tomorrow with the recipe guide in, but you'll also be getting a code to get £10 off this hormone program if you're interested in it. So it's typically $48.99, but obviously the code would bring that down to $38.99, as you know, thanks for coming to my webinar. The members area of my site, then you'd also get access to this when you come on the hormone program or work with me one-to-one. There's different areas to it. So in the members area, we have Create, we have Grow, and we have Learn. So this is what Create looks like. So all of these folders are full of recipes. There's over 100 recipes in the site at the moment, and it grows every week. And then we also have Grow. So there's general nutrition, female health, myths and explanation. There's also a folder on diets, behavior change, everything under the sun. All video delivered content, and the videos aren't as long as this webinar. They're a lot easier to watch. Most of them are around 3 or 4 minutes long. So it's just short information for you to be able to take in on all of these topics. And then Learn is where the hormone program would be kind of kept. And we're also at the moment creating Move, which will be yoga, real-time yoga videos, Pilates videos, at-home workouts. All of that side is being built at the moment. So there's a lot going on, and you get access to all of this alongside the program. So there's lots of things to be looking at and reading all the time. And I know it's one thing me talking about the program, but this is what other people have had to say. So this is from some of the women who have been on the program. My favorite within this is I've loved learning about the positive effects of the hormones that they can have in our bodies. It was great that everything's in a positive light, so they're to not cause us harm. They can be used for the best of our abilities, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do throughout all of this, is to allow everyone to use their hormones in the best possible way, so be the best possible you. So yeah, this is just a couple of comments from people. I don't know if anyone's reading these. And then this is some testimonials from some of my one-to-one clients. So Erica and Joe, I worked with in regards to female health. So Erica, we worked with around her PMS. So she'd had very bad PMS for a week every month, which is now down to 2 days. And she's recently actually come back to me to start working to support her skin, because we've done some functional testing and we've been able to see exactly which of her hormones are out of balance. And now we can use that to support the production pathways and the elimination pathways, and hopefully be able to support her skin. So we're at the early stages of that. Jo suffers with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and she had some very drastic changes within about 2 months of working together, which was really positive. And then Amy was a nutrition counselling client. So we worked together to improve her relationship with food and improve her disordered eating patterns. And she got discharged within about 3 months, because she worked really, really hard, and she's a completely different place now to where she was when we started, which was great. So where to find me if you are interested in talking a little bit more about supporting your hormones or your health or anything, then you can email me. I love a chat. Or you can go straight to my website. So I try to make my website as simple to use as possible. And there's everything that you need to know on that. There's loads of booking forms, and you can also book a free discovery call. So if you're not too sure about how what you need, or if I can help you at all, or what's going on, you can book a free discovery call. You can do that through my website, or you can just email me and we can arrange that. And then it's just a free no obligation chat, just to see kind of where you're at and what you kind of need support with, if any. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram if you don't already. I'm also on Twitter. I'm not very active on Twitter, but I am there. So that's all the different ways of being able to contact me. And finally, I just want to say thanks for coming. So I think I'm just over an hour, and I thought that I was going to go on for way longer, so I'm pleased with my timekeeping. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to stay on the chat, the Zoom. It's not going to close or anything, so if anyone wants to put any questions in, or confused about anything, or want to know any more, unfortunately I can't answer specific things. So if there is something really specific to you, like a symptom that you need support with, I do need to kind of know more about you before I can answer those questions. But yeah, in that case, if you wanted to like book a call with me or something, that's fine. But any kind of general questions or anything I've said today that might have confused you, then please feel free to just put it in the Q&A box. But yeah, other than that, it's been really fun doing my first webinar. I've really enjoyed it. I hope that you've all taken something away from this, even if it's just one thing. I really hope that it's been useful for you, and I hope to do more in the future.